the life of a sailor at sea, we should always remember a ship never sleeps. A ship never sleeps. When a ship is underway, it is 24 hours a day. She's underway, must always be manned and operated. So sailors live a life cycle, a daily cycle. It's quite different from landsmen. You know, we're accustomed to going to sleep at night and waking in the morning. That's not what it's true for a sailor. A sailor's life is divided into watches. Watches are about 4 hours each. And a sailor serves beginning at noon, the watches begin. 12 to 4, 4 to 8, 8 to 12, 12 to 4, 4 to 8, 8 to 12. Round the clock, with one slight exception. And that is that the watch in the late afternoon, from 4 to 8, that 4-hour watch, is usually cut in half. Or as they use the expression, it is docked. So sailors would serve a watch, rather than serving from 4 to 8, you would serve from 4 to 6, and then 6 to 8. They did that so that you would not be required to serve the same watch day after day after day after day. Now the watch itself is timed to the bells. They don't really have clocks at sea. That really hasn't come along well yet. There are chronometers, which are very expensive clocks, but not a lot of ships have those. So time is kept by an hourglass or a half-hourglass. So sailors know what time it is at noon, and you always know when it's noon at sea because you can shoot the sun. The sun is at its highest point at noon, so you know precisely when it's noon. At noon, someone on the quarterdeck rings the bell 8 times. Then you know it is noon. And then someone will turn the half-hour glass, the sand glass. When the sand glass, that half-hour glass, is emptied, someone will strike the bell once. When the glass is turned and you get to the hour, you strike the bell twice. And that will go on 3 bells, 4 bells, 5 bells, 6 bells, 7 bells. And then, when 4 hours is up, 8 bells. At 8 bells on board a vessel, half the crew is happy and the other half's not so happy. Because half the crew is about to go off watch and the other half's about to come on watch. And so that would be the routine aboard a sailing vessel. 24 hours a day divided into watches. Men would eat together in what was called a mess. And usually the way the mess worked is there was a central place where the food was prepared, as much as you could call it food. And one member of the messes were maybe 6 or 8 men together, one member of the mess would be assigned to go get the food. And so he would go and get the food from the cook and bring it back, and it was family dining, and you'd put the food in the middle, and then that they would all consume the food. The food consisted of actually fairly generous portions usually that have peas and cheese, hardtack, which is a very hard kind of bread, and then they would have beef, salted beef, heavily salted beef. The cook would prepare the beef. The beef was kept in casks of salt water to keep it salted. And when he was going to serve it, he'd take the beef out of the cask or out of the barrel at least a day before it was to be prepared. And he'd put it in fresh water, hoping that that fresh water would in fact take much of that salt out of the beef. The cask into which the beef was being readied before it was being served was referred to by the sailors as the harness cask. And the reason they called it the harness cask is that they always accused the cook of buying horse meat, and indeed not only horse meat, but the harness of the horse as well. So it was called the harness. After the beef was as much salt as they could get out of it was taken out, then it would be cooked and served. So that would be the sort of the main part of the meal, would be this salted beef. And they would get, again, usually in ample portions. On long voyages, which the Continental Navy really did not engage in, but other vessels on long voyages during the 18th century, seamen worry about disease because you're in a very confined element. You're in an oaken box. And within that oaken box, when dysentery breaks out, or typhus breaks out, or any number of diseases that you can imagine, highly contagious. And so when you went to sea as a sailor in the Navy, being killed in combat was not your great worry. Your great worry was dying of disease, or, by the way, dying from an accident, falling out of the rigging. That would certainly ruin your entire day. So accidents and disease were the most famous disease, I suppose, that seamen suffered from was scurvy. All of the food that they ate was usually heavily preserved, usually wasn't fresh, and so it lacked vitamin C. They knew nothing about vitamin C, but scurvy would break out because the men did lack it. Scurvy was a terrible disease. Your joints swell up, your teeth fall out, you get terrible headaches, and you die. So going to sea could be relatively dangerous, but not so much for sailors as you would think. It's not so much in battle. It was everything else that might come upon you. The life of a sailor in this very fixed routine, and it is a very fixed routine, is probably pretty dull. I remember someone once remarked that a day at sea was 23 hours of complete and total boredom and 1 hour of sheer terror. And I think that probably sums up what it was like to go to sea in the 18th century in the Continental Navy and the British Navy. Much of going to sea routine, but oh, those moments of terror.